All right, David. First off, welcome to the show. It's good to have you here.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Glad to be here. It's
Got
awesome.
a little workout in before.
Yes, sir.
How you feeling?
Got me pumped up. I feel good.
Yeah, good. We were introduced by a mutual friend, and when he introduced me to you, he was like, "You got to hear his story." So we sat down for coffee, had a good talk, and just very inspiring. So very grateful to have you here to give you a platform to share your show or your story, but also just expand our friendship and everything. So let's start off at the beginning of your story. So you're 20 years old, you have your first experience with bipolarness. Talk us through what that was, what it entailed, and what your experience was.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so when I was 20 years old in college, I had my first depressive episode. I didn't really even know what depression was at that point, and I had no idea at the time that I was bipolar. Basically what happened is I went from being like a straight A student to not being able to get out of bed, started failing all of my classes, didn't want to hang out with my friends, didn't want to leave my room. And that was like my first experience with depression. And there's different types of bipolar. Some can be more rapid cycling. Mine was more like a longer cycling bipolar. Mm-hmm. So it lasted a couple months at that time. And I did go to the doctor at the school, and they put me on some antidepressants, but had terrible side effects. They didn't work very well for me, so I quickly got off of those. But thankfully, that depressive episode ended at that point a couple months later.
Mm-hmm. What was the feeling like? This is new to you, very new emotions and feelings in your life after being alive for 20 years. How were you in a mental state? Like, were you confused? What was your reaction?
Yeah, I was really confused because I wasn't depressed for any reason. Like, my life was, nothing had changed. Like, I was coming back to school, had my same friends. There was like nothing in my life that, you could point to say that this is causing the depression. It just came out of nowhere. And it was actually really scary because I didn't know where it came from. I didn't know when it was going to end. I was questioning, am I always going to be depressed? Is this a new normal? So yeah, it was a really scary experience that first time.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And you said it lasted for a few months, right?
Yeah, it did. And then I had like a period of normalcy. And then I had my first, I'll call it like a baby manic episode, because it was this depressive episode and the manic episode I'm going to talk about are like nothing compared to like what was to come. But the first manic episode saw me actually, I was the opposite of my depression. With my depression, I was like withdrawing. I didn't want to talk to anybody. When the mania came, it was almost more like a hypomania, which is not like a full-blown mania, where like I gained like extreme confidence. I was, the life of the party, basically. I was talking to everyone. I decided to travel for the college, and it was a Christian college, so I was actually like teaching for the college. But with the mania came like this, a lot of times there's like reckless and impulsivity, and this was like the start of all that in my life. So I basically scrapped the whole curriculum that we were supposed to teach when I traveled. I made up my whole own curriculum and ended up, the college got mad at me and I got kicked out of Christian college. So yeah, that's the start to my troubles. Is I have my first manic episode and get kicked out of Christian college for breaking the rules and building my own little traveling evangelist meeting, I guess.
Yeah. What did your peers think of all of this, your friend group, when you were going through it?
They thought it was a little strange to see like the ups and downs, because just a few months earlier they had seen me like really depressed and not wanting to hang out with them, and then after that they couldn't shut me up. Mm-hmm. A lot of bipolar mania, there's like rapid speech, and like a lot of times you can tell with someone that's bipolar if you know them, because they just don't want to stop talking and they just keep going on about everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a big change for everyone. But then I had like some more periods of normalcy between. I married my college sweetheart from Christian college, and things went. I had a couple like minor depressive and manic episodes, very minor. But then at 26, I had my first like major bipolar manic episode. And that's when my whole life changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talk us through that.
Yeah, at 26, so I didn't party at all like growing up. And I'd never been to a club, didn't really even know how that whole life went. But when I turned 26, and this manic episode hit, it was a lot worse than the other episode. And what ended up happening is I ended up just abruptly out of the blue, I left my wife and left my old life and just completely became a different person. I was in the bar 6 or 7 nights a week, learned what clubs were very quickly, and just started partying nonstop. And just, I had probably drank, I could count on one hand how many times I'd probably drank alcohol before that. And now I was like getting obliterated on a nightly basis. So it was like a huge change. So again, that recklessness, that impulsiveness, all of that was showing up. And the only person I'd ever been with sexually was like my ex. And after that, I kind of just started, going after women every night. And I'm just going to be like really raw and vulnerable about mental illness and bipolar, because I don't know how many people that listen like know about it. But one of the things about like bipolar is there's a lot of like sexual promiscuity involved when you're manic. But when you're depressed, it's the opposite. It's like you have no desire at all. So it can be very like frustrating if you're dating someone. So yeah, I went into that, and I'm just trying to hook up with people every night basically, and party every night. So again, people are like, whoa, what's going on? My friends are like, what's going on with this guy again?
Yeah. What was the feeling like the night or the morning after you would go out? So even if it was a nightly basis, let's say Saturday night you go out, Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon you wake up, what is that feeling like? Are you thinking to yourself, hey, like I'm going down the wrong path, or this is a bad habit? Or was it just like, I'm ready for the next night?
Yeah. So another thing about like bipolar mania is you have tons of like extra energy. So I wouldn't wake up hangover like the normal person and lick my wounds. I was just ready to go out again. You don't need as much sleep. So being manic almost feels like you're a superhuman, and I describe it as it's fun until it's not. And as you hear more of my story, you're gonna see when it's not fun. But at first, I loved the feeling. It's just like you have all this natural extra energy. So now I was just like ready to go. And the other thing I was gonna say to that is like with mania, there's like a part of your brain, the rational part, and it gets turned off. So I wasn't like really thinking about the consequences of my decisions at all. And when I was manic, you don't really think about those things. It's a very pleasure-seeking. It's very much pleasure-seeking behavior when you're manic.
Yeah. What else were you doing on like a day-to-day basis? Were you working at this time?
I was.
Yeah.
I was a financial advisor at the time, and I was having some trouble at work, I would say. I would come in hungover a lot. This is before I started using drugs, so it got way worse later. But at this point, I was just drinking and coming in really hungover. So my performance like plummeted. I was like one of the top advisors before that. But yeah, I was definitely plummeting because of all the partying. So yeah, my work was certainly being affected. Oh, and then just to kind of describe, I'll start going into all the crazy things that happen, I guess, now. So I'm not even divorced yet. It's probably just a few. So I went through that hookup phase, but then it's a few months later, and I meet another girl, and she's do you know what an au pair is?
No.
It's like a foreign nanny.
Okay.
So she had I guess she had a work visa from Mexico to be here in the U.S. And another thing, so I mentioned that with bipolar, there's like a lot of impulsive decisions. So like I quickly fell in love with. This is like a trend with my bipolar. I'd fall in love very quickly with people. So I fall in love with this girl, and then I think we were dating like 2 months, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not even fully divorced. And then she springs on me that I have a choice to make. She either has to go back to Mexico because her visa's up, or we can get married.
Yep.
So there I am. I'm on a plane flying to Mexico. I've memorized my little Spanish speech to try to give to her mom to ask for her mom's blessing in the marriage. And the girl, we want to say her name at the time, didn't even know I'm like not divorced. And again, that's where the rational part of my mind was turned off. I didn't even think that would be a problem, because I was like, oh, I'll figure it out later. I'll get this divorce finalized before we get married or whatever. So yeah, I go to Mexico. I meet all her family. I ask the mom's blessing. We come back to the U.S., and that's where I got hit with another depressive episode. And That depressive episode was the worst one I've ever been through. Like, it was awful. And it started out like the girl I was dating, like, just couldn't understand the change in my behavior. Again, like, I didn't want to do anything physically when when you're manic, that's like all you want to do. Your sex drive is through the roof. So it started like that with us. But then it got to where I could hardly sleep at night. I got so low at that point that I became like extremely suicidal, and that's like all I could think about. It's like when I was at work, that was what I was thinking about. I lived very close to work, so I would drive home on my lunch break, and I don't know, am I allowed to like talk?
Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I would like Google ways to end things a lot, and like one way I was like stuck on is I would like go stand in my garage and just like try to get the courage up to like flood my garage with carbon monoxide and end things. I would do that like every day, multiple times. And then the other thing I would always do is like I would pour pills into my hand and just like try to get up the courage to take them. And it was getting like worse and worse. And I was like this close to ending my life at that point. But thankfully I had a moment of clarity. And in the moment of clarity, like I realized like I didn't want to die. I just wanted the pain to end.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do. Like I didn't want to call my parents. I didn't know what to do. So all I could think of to do is I packed a bag, and I drove to this mental hospital called Wakiva Springs in Jacksonville, Florida. And I checked in. I didn't know what to bring. So I still remember this because it's an interesting scene. They're like going through my bag, and they take my shoes out, and then they like take the shoelaces. They're like, no, you can't have your shoelaces. They take my razor. They say like, these are all things you can't have here. So I'm like, I didn't even know like what you could have or not have. But they did tell me, they're like, this is unusual that you drove yourself in. Like most people like get committed by or whatever. So at least I did have the clarity to like drive myself in. And I ended up being there for several days. This is when I was 27 at that time. And that's when I found out that I was bipolar. They had a doctor come in. So this is what happens normally with bipolar people. Not everyone, but most bipolar people find out they're bipolar years later, because you go to the doctor for the depression. And so most bipolar people are treated for depression. But the mania is kind of, like I said, fun until it's not. So you don't go to the doctor a lot of times until you're committed, or you commit a lot of people have psychosis where they lose touch with reality, or just have a suicidal attempt or ideations like I did. And that's how they're found out. So when the doctor's with me, he's asking me all these questions. He finds out how I like abruptly left my wife, how I'm partying all the time, how I almost get married to this other girl. Like, I didn't even tell you, but we went ring shopping.
Wow.
Like, I was about to propose to her till my like depressive episode hit, and then she like had to go back to Mexico, I guess. But yeah, when I told him all this, he's like, "You're bipolar," and I didn't know what that was. So like, I asked him, what does that mean? And he basically explained and I can go over it real quick. So bipolar is really just where there's two poles. There's the depression side, and then there's a manic side, which is the exact opposite of depression. You're on like this elevated high where you have all those behaviors that I was talking about earlier that come in, plus other ones that we're going to talk about later on, like addiction and a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, that's when I found out that I was bipolar. And it's different. Like when you talk to bipolar people, some people like find relief. Some people, it's like a death sentence to them. I think I kind of found relief because there was like a name on what was wrong with me. And the doctor told me that he thought there was medication that could help me. So that was like a sense of relief. But he did tell me that it might take a while with the medication to find the right medication for my situation.
Okay.
So that was very true. It's there's a bunch of medications out there for people, but every person's different. So like it'd be nice if like with most with most physical problems, it's kind of like a common solution for, oh, you need this surgery, you need this. But mental health is like very different, because sometimes there's trial and error. We don't always know, like there's not one size fits all for mental health. So it could be like very difficult. But that's when I started my journey with the medications.
Yeah.
And so they only put me on one medication to start. It was for the depression and sleep, because I think a big part of why I was suicidal was not being able to sleep at night. It's crazy. It's like a dichotomy, because I was extremely tired from being bipolar, but I couldn't sleep. I would just like lay in bed, and not sleeping just, I think, exasperated me more and more towards being suicidal. So the medicine he put me on, it helped me with sleep and my depression. So I was there several days. I went to like group therapies. I went to like the main people at the mental hospital were people like me who were suicidal. But I guess it wasn't only a mental hospital, because there are people that had drug issues as well. So I was like exposed to heroin addicts for the first time, and like that was eye-opening to me. Like just I couldn't believe like what they were going through with the withdrawal symptoms. So that
Right.
of all drugs, that kept me away from heroin, at least. Like I could not imagine like what those people were going through. So it was mainly like people like me that were extremely depressed and suicidal, and like drug addicts on hard drugs.
What was that like, receiving the news from the doctor saying you're diagnosed with being bipolar? What was going through your mind? I know there's some confusion of, what does this mean? What does this entail? How do I get better? But once that's all unfolded for you, and here's the medication to take, here's what you're going to experience, here's what you've been experiencing, what was going through your mind?
I think what was going through my mind was, I think I was hopeful, I guess, that this was going to work, and I was going to give it my all, basically, to try to get better. But yeah, it's a good segue, because the first medication like helped a little bit, but then I was put on a medication called lithium that actually helps a lot of bipolar people. But this is why it's like so different for different people. It turned me into like a walking zombie. Like I literally felt like a shell of myself. I just felt like I was like from The Walking Dead or something. And I stopped taking that medication. I was like, no, I cannot take this medication. So I kept taking the first medication for the depression, but I stopped taking the medication that was supposed to help more with the lithium is more like a stabilizer. So it kind of keeps you from going too far to the like depressed or manic. Plus it can help like avoid, a lot of it is to help avoid mania. And that's exactly what happened next. Is I had a way bigger manic episode than like I had ever had before. And that's where things got like really crazy, because that's when I first got into drugs. And I felt a little more innocently, I guess. It was going to music festivals and like ecstasy and Molly and things like that. But that was just at festivals. Yeah. So I didn't like have an addiction to those. But then I tried Coke for the first time, and that was, I should never have tried it. That was bad, because I started using, like I quickly found that I loved it. I loved how it made me feel. I lean more to the introverted side. So Coke brought out this like crazy, wild party side of me. But then when I'm manic, I'm already not introverted. I'm more of an extrovert. So, but the Coke like put that all on another level. So I felt like I was this like, all I wanted to do is party, basically, when I did Coke. So again, if you go back to work now, it's getting worse, because like I'm in the bathroom, like taking key bumps in the stall before I go work, or I go into my car and I'm doing Coke. I go on my lunch break and do line sonic. I'm doing drugs all the time. And what that led to is like I didn't want to work anymore. So the mania plus the Coke made me like not even want to do my job anymore. And what happened next is I ended up meeting some people through partying, and they told me about this this pharmaceutical sales gig. and I'll get into that now. It's a little crazy, but so with this pharmaceutical sales gig, they were making like a lot of money. They explained how it all worked to me basically, and I was like, okay, so I'm in. Like I was manic at the time. I didn't have that rational part of my brain turned on. I wasn't like trying to make money to like save it. I was trying to make money just to party and do more drugs. So I had like no notion of, okay, let me start trying to make more money doing this. And I was doing well, you know, in my finance job. You know, I was making in the six figures. But when my new friends like showed me what they were making during this pharmaceutical sales gig, I was like, okay, I got to do this. And then they explained it to me, and it was illegal. But yeah, it's crazy. Like I've studied this a lot with so with bipolar people, like 60% of bipolar people become addicted to something. So becoming a drug addict is like not at all out of the norm for bipolar people. And in talking to psychiatrists, and my psychiatrist, unfortunately, getting involved in crime is actually very. It happens a lot with bipolar people. Wow. It happens way more than you would think. So. Basically, I don't know. Do you want me to get into that?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So how it worked is there were these compounding creams. Basically, what a compounding cream is it's a cream with a bunch of different ingredients that you put together, and the ingredients can bill out. If you put certain ingredients together, they bill out for like exorbitant amounts of money. What I mean by that is like, this cream would probably not be very expensive to make, but it could bill out like 20 to 25 grand a month. Yeah, to an insurance company. And I could get 20 to 25% commission on each cream. So if one person, like let's just say you went to the doctor and you got the prescription, I could make like 4 or 5 grand off of your prescription.
Jeez.
Yeah. So you do the math. So basically, the medication was legal, right? And it's not like opioids. I know people have probably seen that movie where like the creams weren't like hurting people. Yeah. It wasn't like opioids or anything like that. But yeah, that you put them on like topically, and they're supposed to help with scars or pain or migraines or things like that. So where it became illegal is you would pay people like under the table to, let's say you were my friend, like, and you had the appropriate insurance. I would like could pay you under the table like $500 a month to go get this prescription, and I'm pocketing the other $400 or $3,500 or whatever. So that's where it gets illegal, because it's called kickbacks, and you're paying someone. So you're paying your friends maybe to go get the prescription, or you're paying doctors if you really want to make money, and you're giving the doc, like splitting the money with like obviously not all most doctors wouldn't do this, but there's people in every field that want more money.
Yeah.
You know,
hungry for it.
So yeah, I like didn't mean to get involved in all this. It kind of just, I was manic. I wanted to party, and I like saw this opportunity to make money and party in a different way that I'd never partied. Like getting like it turned into like VIP every night, flying to Vegas and Miami all the time on these like crazy lavish trips. It just turned into like a whole nother lifestyle. And I quit my finance job. You know, I was making great money there, but this was like a whole nother level. So I quit my job, and this is all I was doing. And it wasn't hard. Like, you're not even really working at all. You're just paying people. So really we're not working. We have an office, but we're not doing it. We're playing ping pong and going to the strip club at noon and getting bottle service.
Yeah.
Like that was my job basically.
Wow. Yeah. When did that all come to an end? Like, what was the moment you were thinking, I can't be doing this anymore?
Okay. So I'd say that went on for like a year probably. And it's getting crazier and crazier. Like, we're making more and more money. And yeah, like some of the top earners were making in the millions, some people in the hundreds of thousands. So yeah, we were just, like I said, all we were doing is like lavish partying, lots of drugs, all of that. So I wasn't thinking about I never even looked into what consequences for this could be, right? Like most people probably would. But one of the problems like with mania and drug use, like the cocaine would, like my normal manic episode would probably be like a few months, like 3 months maybe. But if I was doing Coke every day, which like instead of drinking coffee in the morning, I would do lines of Coke.
Gotcha.
So like my manic episodes would be like extended. So how it ended was in May of 2015. I'll obviously always remember this date. But yeah, in May of 2015, the FBI raided our office. I guess it wasn't just the FBI. It was the FBI, the IRS, and like the Navy also like raided our office. The reason
For a squad out.
Yeah, I think the Navy was involved because there's a naval base in Jacksonville, and we were like paying. It was mostly paying like military people to get these prescriptions because TRICARE insurance like was the one that reimbursed for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, they sent like the whole squad. The crazy thing is I was not at work I was driving on the way to work when they raided our office. Yeah. But I get a call from my buddy across the hall. He worked at an insurance agency across the hall, and he calls me. He tells me like that there's FBI agents in my office, and I literally laugh at him. Like I never thought this could happen. I never even thought about the consequences. And you know, after he keeps telling me, I'm like, okay, maybe this is true. And like, yeah, I swung my car around, did not go to the office, swung my car around, like went back to my condo, like locked myself in there, and I was like, oh crap, like what am I gonna do here?
That's wild. Yeah. Who was like in your support circle back then? Was it just the people you're working with? Who was around you?
Yeah, so this is something like, so there's a lot of things like when you're bipolar manic that you like are kind of like ashamed of. I didn't probably treat and the funny thing is they stayed, like I'm still friends with all my old original friends. They like came back and forgave me, but I kind of, they were the voices of reason, right? They were telling me not to do this stuff, but so I kind of just started hanging out with a whole new crowd of people, and just shutting out, like again that rational part of your mind just kind of turned off when you're manic. So I just didn't listen to them. I was like listening to my new friends.
Yeah, that makes sense. What happens after this?
Yeah, so what happens after this is I get depressed. Like my mania ends, which I think you'd probably expect my mania to end at that point. I end up having to get a lawyer, and the crazy part, like so I had no idea like what we were doing was like not that it was so illegal, but like what the consequences were. And I remember getting my lawyer, and he told me I was potentially facing 7 years in prison. Like I had no idea it would be like that much. And I didn't understand how all that works either. They base that off of like loss amount. So there's like a table that is what sentencing is based on for like white collar crime, which this was. And like the amount of money I cost the government was 3.5 million. I didn't make that for myself.
Right.
I made a good amount, but I cost the government 3.5 million. So based on that, and then they look at your priors. I had no criminal history. Like if you have criminal history, you go even farther on the table.
Okay.
So, but based on no criminal history and the amount of money I cost the government, I was facing over 7 years in prison. So obviously, like I got depressed. But this is the crazy part. Kind of is. I knew I was bipolar now, and I was scared that I was going to have another episode where I almost killed myself, or maybe did this time. So what I did is I did the opposite of what my lawyer told me. My lawyer told me, slow down, like don't get in any trouble, don't do anything stupid. But yeah, about a month later, I decide I'm going to go to Vegas to party instead. And it was supposed to be just like a 3-day trip, me and my buddy. I think he stayed 3 or he may have extended one more day, but I ended up being in Vegas 12 nights.
Wow.
Yeah, and if you've ever been
long time in Vegas.
Yeah, that's not a good idea at all. And so like I basically just like made all these new friends, and I was trying to kick my depression. That's what I was trying to do, and I did. I did so much drugs while I was in Vegas that I flipped my depression into another manic episode. Because like sadly I knew like I could possibly do that if I partied hard enough. So I wanted to be manic because I didn't want to go through the pain of depression. But the problem with the mania and the Vegas thing was like I just like blew money like there was no tomorrow. Like I was getting like VIP sections by myself and just inviting all my new friends into so yeah, I ended up in the hospital at one point while I was in Vegas. Not necessarily for partying, but I got like this really bad infection in my leg. Well, it was because of partying. I did a backflip off like my pool cabana and hit the side of the pool, like blood gushing everywhere, but I didn't get it stitched up because I wanted to keep partying.
Yeah.
Didn't, like, again, you don't think about anything rationally. So I ended up in the hospital for that. The doctor says, you look terrible. You need to like stop partying. I think I partied a couple more nights. And then I got home and I realized like I'd lost like 10 pounds, I think. And I was in bed sick for like 3 days from all the partying. But in my mind, in my manic mind, I wasn't depressed anymore. So.
Yeah.
But that turned into I didn't want to be in Jacksonville anymore because I felt like I was around the negativity too much. So again, I was still manic. So instead of staying there, I moved to Austin, and I did about the dumbest thing you could possibly do yet again, even dumber than Vegas. I still had all that money, right?
Yeah.
So I invested in a nightclub here. It's an after hours club. So in my manic mind, I was like, what do I like to do? Party. Where's the best place to party? Maybe your own club. So I invested in this club called The Vault. It's closed now. You'll hear about that. But it's on like 5th and Congress here in Austin. It was like a underground club. It held like 305 people. It was supposed to be like a more like elite club with we felt like we had found a way around the system because like you can't buy alcohol after 2 a.m. So we were like we had liquor lockers and like bottles basically. So like you would like pay us to like have a liquor locker and maybe pay for tables, and we would like comp bottles. It was just like ways where you weren't I think it was a decent idea, but
that's smart.
Yeah, but when you're manic, your execution is very poor.
Yeah.
So I buy into this club, but I'm also it gets worse. It got worse and worse because so I buy into this club, but instead of trying to run it properly like a normal owner would do, I'm in my club like doing the most and partying every night that it's open. Instead of selling the biggest VIP section, I'm in it just getting hammered. I'm not managing it. I'm not. I had a partner at first, but he hated what I was doing. Like I was a horrible owner. So he quit. I bought him out. So now I own the club by myself. And owning the club, like you're paying rent. Like I didn't own the building, I just owned the club.
Yeah.
But so yeah, now most everyone that was good quit because of me. Like when because I would literally be so drunk I'd walk around the club and just drop a bottle of glass liquor and just shatter everywhere. Like I was a menace. Like no one, like so people didn't want to be around me. Like the workers. Right. I remember one time I got locked in the office and I had done a bunch of coke. So I like didn't think logically to maybe call someone. So I threw a chair through the window and just like glass went everywhere. So I was being like that all the time, and I was super erratic. Like so, all the good people quit. I hire these like party friends and they like start stealing money from me. The club like turns from this elite club, it starts like going downhill to like a not elite club where people aren't really wanting to pay for the liquor lockers anymore. But I don't really care, and I don't really notice, honestly. Like that's the crazy thing, because I'm still living off all the money that I'd made legally from the financial job and illegally from the other job. But then it gets worse because I start giving loans to people. Like I gave, for instance, like these big loans to people. Some of them I didn't even have them sign for them. Like for instance, there was one that I gave this guy a $60,000 loan without even like really doing a lot of like research into the company or anything. I just thought he was my friend. He never paid me back. So I lost 60 G's on that. And then, so I'm doing stuff like that, plus the club, which is starting to go downhill. Then probably the kicker is I moved my drug dealer into my spare bedroom to get a discount on drugs. And that's when I did like the most drugs I'd ever, like all I did is drugs, and everything just started to like crash around me like a house of cards at that point.
What's going through your mind on a day-to-day basis? Are you trying to escape this?
No.
Okay.
It's so hard to explain bipolar because it doesn't make sense.
Right.
I literally was having the time of my life, I thought. I was just partying nonstop, and I had no thought about. I didn't realize how much money I was going through. I never looked at my bank accounts. I never looked at my savings. I remember when I went into the bank one time, like they knew me definitely by my name and everything else. They said I got the most debit cards of any person that's ever been there in 1 year, because I was in there like literally every few days getting a new debit card because I would lose it. But I thought I was having fun, and some of my new friends here were having fun for a while, but then it just got even too much for them, and they stopped hanging out with me. So I started hanging out with like more and more nefarious like people who started like taking like advantage of me, and like it's hard to explain, but I didn't realize I was like running out of money. I didn't even get into this, so like as I like to explain, I don't feel like there's a lot of people that explain bipolar, and that's why I just want to be vulnerable and explain it. But another thing I had done during this time is I went to Miami on like vacation, and I met a girl there. I knew her for like 2 days, but I thought I fell in love with her. She had a boyfriend that she like lived with in Louisiana, but I convinced her to visit me. Like, so we hung out 2 more days, and then I asked her to be my girlfriend and to move in with me. Like, I knew this girl for 4 days. Yeah. So like that's the kind of like stuff you do sometimes, at least that I did when I was manic. I would just make these ridiculous decisions that like made no sense. We ended up breaking up because she like cheated on me or whatever, but I didn't care because I was just partying. And it's just it's really hard to explain because it makes no sense until like the depression or you get stabilized. But while you're manic, like you're just having fun.
Yeah, that's wild. So the club goes downhill. You're still in Austin. What's happening around that time?
Okay, so I didn't realize that this is crazy because I had like hundreds of thousands of dollars in my bank account. And then I kind of realized that I went to go buy something, and like I was in the negative in my account, and I was like, how did this I didn't really realize how it happened. Like it blew my mind that I was in the negative. So I say luckily at the time, but it was not luckily, but I had a 401k still. So I was like, I guess I'll start spending my 401k now. So a normal person like would have stopped when they blew through their whole bank account. But I had a pretty decent sized 401k. So I just started taking withdrawals from my 401k basically, and blowing through that and credit cards at that point. So I think by that point, this is like a few months into the club. The club actually did really well the first couple months because it was a great idea. Maybe someone else will do it, but not me. I will never.
You can invest in it.
No,
don't step foot in it.
No, I'm done with clubs. But so the club's going downhill. It's actually losing money. So like, I can't afford rent. At this point, I actually should probably add this. So I have a new live-in girlfriend that I fell in love with. The one from Miami cheated on me, so I have this like new girlfriend. And I thought this girl was with me for like my money and that I was fun and things like that. Because like at the time she thought I had a lot of money. All we did is party. We had a great time together. But then everything starts going like crashing around me, right? So I start not being able to afford rent on the club. I blow through my 401k pretty quickly. I went back like through my bank statements, and like there was one month where I spent like $100,000 in one month.
Holy shit.
Just on like loans, on clubs, like, so I blew all that money I made. I blew through all of it in like a year. Like yeah, when I met you, I was like, I don't know if he'll believe my story. So the day we met at the coffee shop, I brought my bank statement just in case. Because I know
That's hilarious.
I know this is like a wild story, but I was like, I don't want him to think I'm making this up.
Yeah.
I got like bank statements to show you. But yeah, it was wild. So you didn't ask for my bank statements. So that was good because we knew each other through mutual friends. Yeah. But yeah, everything's, and it's definitely not, this story is definitely not a brag because it, like, my life falls apart in a minute here. So the club, basically, I can't afford rent. At the same time, I can't afford rent at I have like a really nice condo downtown, basically. And all at once, this is like August or September of 2016. So the FBI had raided my office in 2015. So in like a year and a couple months, I blew through hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I became broke. I was evicted from my apartment. I couldn't service the rent on the club, so the club closed. And yeah, I guess there's so much more places I could go with this story, but I guess the best place to probably go with it is me and my ex-girlfriend went from this like wealthy lifestyle to losing everything. And I say we became homeless. We weren't like living under the bridge, but we were living day to day out of like a dirt cheap motel, basically. And she worked a night shift job, and if she didn't make enough money on the night shift, like we had nowhere to go. We'd have to like sleep out of a car, basically. So so I went from that lifestyle, owning a club, having all this money, to having nothing. And just to like show you another, because I've thought through all of this, just how like it makes no sense. You know, a normal person when they're evicted from their apartment would probably put their stuff in storage. I didn't do that. I had like really nice furniture. I just left it all there. So when I say we lost everything, we lost everything. Yeah. Like the only thing we had is stuff that we could fit in my convertible car. So like we literally just had suitcases. We lost everything. And yeah, I thought that my girlfriend would leave me at the time because I had nothing and I had like squandered everything. But this is where I feel like relationships are like so important in life, because we're not together anymore, but I think very highly of her. It's been like 4 years since we broke up, but she took care of me. Like I got hit with a major depressive episode after all that happened, and I couldn't get a job. So I can kind of go into the depression a little bit there. For me, my depression makes me like my mind like 100 times slower, like slow as molasses is how I would call it. So with my depression, I would go in these job interviews and I would just like bomb all of them, because if you asked me any question that wasn't according to like anything off script, I could not, my mind couldn't even think properly. I remember bombing one interview because they asked me like to try to calculate how many Starbucks there were in the US. And
it was an obscure question.
Yeah, but normally I could at least come up, I could come up with something. Yeah. I literally just sat there and the guys like talked me through your thinking. And like I had to like walk out of the interview because I couldn't even start.
There's nothing. There's no thinking.
There's nothing up there. Yeah. So I bombed like at least 20 different job interviews. And yeah, so my ex, I didn't want to call my parents like at the time. So like I would have probably been like living under the street if my ex wasn't like taking care of me during this time.
Why do you think she was staying throughout all this?
Because she loved me.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'd never seen a love like that. She was a great loyal girlfriend at that time. Like you know, most people would never do that. But she like rare. Yeah, she really loved me. So that's why she did that. I think. And then so we were living out of hotels for a couple months. And then from there, we were finally able to like scrounge up enough money to get a cheap studio apartment, but we had like no other money. We couldn't even afford furniture. So like I remember like it's yesterday, like moving in. We were still happy to move in, but we went to Target and like all we could afford is an air mattress. Like that's the only furniture we had. And we had like $20 to buy food. So I think we bought like peanut butter and jelly and like lunch meat and ramen and stuff. So yeah, I went from living this like wealthy lifestyle to like living in a tiny apartment on an air mattress with like the cheapest food imaginable.
Yeah, it's incredible just how quickly life can change. From there, you go through all of this. What's the next step in your life to say like I want to make a positive change, and not just like I want to make more money, but like I really want to make it out of this?
Yes, I think that was the perfect question. Because yeah, so I would say what got me through that time, I don't know what would have happened if not for my girlfriend. She, what really got me through though is, it's sad to even like talk about, but like I would see her like come home from work and just like be crying and laying in the closet because like she was overwhelmed like with our situation, and I couldn't get a job because of like my mental state, but I made a commitment to myself that I was going to like somehow get us out of this and like get us in a better situation. So what that involved was I had to go see another psychiatrist. And that's where things like start getting better in my story, because I found my psychiatrist that I still have today, and he ended up putting me on the right cocktail of medication finally. Like I had tried things on and off for years, but had kind of like gotten off them because side effects were so bad, or like I felt like a shell of myself. But we finally found the right medication for me, and for the first time in years, I finally felt stabilized. I wasn't having these mood swings. I was no longer like super depressed or super manic. I felt stable. So, and not everyone has to, like, I don't want to ever speak for every bipolar person, but for me, that had to be the first step, was for me to become properly medicated so that I could move forward in my life.
Yeah. Going back to the case, FBI rating, you still haven't had an answer about this. How have you been able to, present day, stay sane and just surrender to like, I'm not sure what is going to happen, but we're just in a waiting period?
Yeah, this is that's a great segue. So yeah, to expound a little bit more on that, if you do the math, May of 2015 was when they raided our office. So it's over 9 years now. And yeah, I'm still waiting for my sentencing. I had a sentencing hearing 3 years ago, so I thought it was all going to happen then. That was a very surreal experience for me. Like one of the weirdest things I ever experienced. Like I felt out of body because like my life is like in this judge's hands. I don't know what's gonna happen. I got to get up there and talk, and I was able to talk about my bipolar disorder to her and like give her all the medical records from the mental hospital, the doctors, and she hadn't really like seen all of it, I guess. So between that and then my mom, my brother, and people getting up and talking about like how much my life had changed, she said that she couldn't sentence me at that point. She had to think about things more, because she didn't I think the word she said is she didn't realize the extent of my bipolar. And I thought that was gonna like maybe be a few months later that I'd have my sentencing, but it's 3 years later. We're still waiting on that. So at first it was like really hard because like that's why I was depressed. When I became manic, I know it probably doesn't make sense, but I wasn't thinking about it at all. I was just partying. And that's another reason why I wanted to stay manic and party, because I wasn't
suppressing all of it.
Yeah, suppressing like all of it. But after I got stable on my meds, it's different for every person. But I think for me, that got me at least 50% of the way. to where I wanted to be, or where I needed to be in my life. So I needed the meds like as like a baseline. But then from there, I've had to do like a lot of work in my life to like become the right person, and that took years. So what I think is, I'll start with this, but then I'll kind of go into how all of that happened. What I think is the biggest thing in my life that has got me through is the Lord. So I became a Christian when I was younger. Went to Bible college, and actually graduated not from the college I was kicked out of, from another one. So I know I just told you that wild story, but I graduated with a degree in ministry. I was actually like a youth pastor for a few months, but I didn't like it. This is going to sound crazy. I didn't like it because I didn't feel like I could identify with the kids, and I felt like I had no story like to like help them.
Okay.
So like I figured out how to get into finance, took my Series 7, got into that. So I was a Christian before, but obviously during all of this time, I wasn't going to church. I wasn't involved in my faith at all. But the biggest thing that's helped me is my faith. But that came later. I actually just rededicated my life to the Lord within the last year. So that's a newer, like I was going to church and I was like slowly coming back to God, and he was helping me. But like, honestly, rededicating my life to the Lord has like given me so much peace in my life. I know it might sound crazy because I have this sentence like hanging over my head, and do I think about it every day? Yeah, of course I do. But am I freaked out about it? No, I'm really not. So I think that's the first really big thing, is like my faith in the Lord has like really been my rock, and like gotten me through and started to give me a lot of peace. So that's the number one thing that I think that's gotten me through. Another let's see where to go with this. Another thing that's really got me through this is I had to like shift my perspective. I think shifting your perspective in life is like one of the most important things that anyone could do. I had to like find meaning in my mess that I made, and I had to find like a lesson and a purpose, and that's kind of what's happened in my life. And I probably need to take a step back to explain kind of where I'm at now and how all this transpired. So after I was stabilized on my meds, I told you I'd bombed all those interviews, right? So I bombed all those interviews, but I finally got a job in finance again. And I worked there for 5 years, and I was able to rebuild everything I lost, and I'm making, in the hundreds of thousands again. I went from, being homeless to living at this hotel on an air mattress to working really hard and making really good money again. But this is where I messed up, and like I take accountability for it. I should have told them about my court case, because like 5 years in, they run like a background check, and I get fired from my job. This is about 1.5 years ago.
Okay.
So about 1.5 years ago, I'm fired from work, and what I should have done in retrospect was, but I was operating from like a place of lack at that time, because it had been so hard to get a job, that I was kind of just like grasping on everything I could. And I was like, I need this job. I don't know what's going to happen when I lose this job. But when I lost that job, it was probably the best thing that could have happened in my life, because it sent me on the journey that I'm on now. And on that journey, basically, the first thing that happened is I'd really started to do like a lot of the self-help stuff and learn about stuff. So I was like, okay, like how do I find meaning in this and find the right perspective? And what I did is I was like, I've always wanted to go on a like solo trip. I always wanted to travel. So, because at first I was starting to get depressed about losing my job, as anyone would, because I was like, okay, I have a criminal record. Like, what am I going to do? Yeah. I was like, I'm going to go on a trip and not plan it at all. I'd been a planner, financial planner, and done a lot of planning. So I was like, I'm just going to wing this trip. So I told you about this before a little bit, but I booked a one-way ticket to Vietnam. I booked 2 nights in a hotel, and I have nothing else planned. I just went there, and I went there to have an adventure, but also in hopes of like figuring out like where I was going to go in life.
Right. Yeah.
And I did have an adventure. You know, I got scuba certified, and where are we on time?
You're good.
We're good. Okay. Yeah, so I got like scuba certified while I was out there. I made a bunch of new friends. I could go into the whole story, but I think the other stuff's even more important. But yeah, I had the trip of my life. I thought I'd maybe be out there a month or two. I'm out there 6 months, go to 5 different countries, and having an amazing experience. But yeah, well, my last month while I'm in Bali, it's kind of like an eat, pray, love thing, I guess, because it happened to be there too. Because everyone in Bali is like trying to find themselves. There's a lot of like divorcees trying to, you know, like recover, or people just trying to like find their purpose. And I really felt that too. I'm a Christian, but like I felt like this energy there that was like pulling me towards finding like a higher purpose. So between that energy there and then God, of course, being in my life, I spent like a month and a half in Bali doing yoga. I got this like place in the rice fields like by myself.
Nice.
So I'm just journaling a lot. And while I was there, I figured out, like I actually, while I was there, I also took a Tony Robbins course at him and Dean Graziosi did like a course. And I realized like through that course, they talk about your mess becoming your message. And the best thing you can do in life is a lot of times helping your younger self with something you struggled with. So I realized like, sure, I made a lot of money in finance, but that wasn't what I was really called to do. While I was there, I figured out my passion and my purpose, like my meaningful mission, is to help other people that are going through the same things I'm going through. And that could be mental illness, through being vulnerable and sharing my story, or it could just be encouraging them through anything I've gone through, like addiction, homelessness, resilient. I just really want to encourage. That's the whole reason I wanted to do this podcast and start doing these things. Is I just want to encourage people that are struggling, that there is hope out there for them, and that they can find peace. Because I think a lot of people, and this is not wrong at all, but a lot of people on podcasts, or just period, they're at a peak, right? So they're giving advice from a peak. I'm not at a peak, but I've still found peace where I'm at right now. So to tell you where I'm at right now, it's nowhere near where I used to be financially, right? And I had to like come to grips with being okay with sharing my story. So now I drive a delivery truck for one of the big companies. I think I make maybe 1/6 of what I used to make doing that. And what I do besides that, though, is I'm working on my coaching practice. I'm building a coaching practice. It started out more towards just bipolar people, but then I realized I just want to help anyone that I can encourage. Like, so it's kind of morphing. It's constantly changing and pivoting. I really just started all of this within the past year. So I haven't arrived yet, I wouldn't say, but I'm on that path but I have so much joy and like so much peace now that it might sound crazy to other people, because I'm making way less money. So I'm not like in anywhere near the financial situation I was, but I'm so much happier than I used to be. And a lot of that's because I'm doing something that really satisfies me. And I found a purpose that's bigger than me. And not everyone, it doesn't have to be their full-time job like I want it to be for me. Some people, they can just find something on the side that brings them a purpose and meaning. But for me, that's what I want the rest of my life to be. I think the first part of my life was just a bunch of chaos, really. It was, I guess I tried to find peace by making a lot of money and and partying a lot through the mania, because like you said, I'd suppress things and didn't want to and didn't want to think about them. But yeah, now I have the most peace and joy that I've like ever had in my life.
I love that. One thing that stands out from you speaking about that is your smile. Like you seem genuinely happy and satisfied with where you are right now,
Really,
which before, like you probably wouldn't be able to say that. It's like you're chasing something that had no end, that had no purpose, no meaning. It was just, that was one season of your life that, you know, didn't really bring anything.
Yeah.
And now you're going for so much more purpose. And previously success looked like drugs and alcohol and partying and finding more money so you can spend it on more things. And now success looks a lot different. So how would you define success today?
Yeah, I think before, you're right. I would have defined success as those things: partying, womanizing, just any of that stuff. And I did have fun at the time, maybe parts of it, but there's no long-term meaning in any of that. There's none of it. So I now define success. I've said it a couple of times already, but yeah, now I'll go into it. I think for me, success is one word. It's peace. Like, because of my mind having been so chaotic and crazy, having a peace in my life and a contentment, like a real peace and a real joy, that's how I define my success. Because yeah, from the world's perspective, maybe I'm not as successful as I used to be, but I'm way more on the inside. I'm way more successful than I've ever been.
It's so powerful. I love that. And it's just, you have conviction behind it too. And there's no money tied to it or status or what you drive or where you live. It's just, I feel content and comfortable with who I am as a person. And I know I'm going to make an impact. And yeah, I can feel it from you. So I definitely appreciate that out of you. My next question for you is, what is one thing you believe in that most people would disagree on?
Okay. One thing let's see, probably I'll go back to traveling on that. I think taking a solo trip with no plans at all is like one of the most awesome, rewarding things that you could ever do. I've planned most of my other trips, but just doing that experience was incredible. So for anyone that loses their job, or I think that's the perfect time to go on a trip, because in America it's very hard with the vacation. We get to go on like a really long trip, but just take a trip. I think for me, I kind of live life differently because of what I've been through. My perspective's just a little bit different. So I look at life as like this insane adventure now. So I don't want to wait till I'm older to do all these things. I almost lost my life several times. I didn't even go into some of the other stories about how I almost got shot and things like that. But so to me, life is a gift. So I think take a solo trip, do the fun, crazy things now. Go for your go for your dreams. I think that for me is, not everyone will tell you to do that, but for me, those were incredible experiences.
That's awesome. What's one place for the audience if they're looking for somewhere to travel internationally? What would you recommend?
I've done probably the most of my travel in Southeast Asia, so I'm biased because I love diving, but Indonesia, and you could also snorkel, but Indonesia has some of the best like wildlife out there. And I think you could do the best of both worlds, because you get Bali with the whole like eat, pray, love, like culture, but then you also get the diving and all of that. So I think Indonesia is amazing. I'll put a plug in for Thailand. On my trip, I really loved 4 countries specifically: Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, and Vietnam.
Okay.
I would highly recommend those 4 countries.
Beautiful. For someone listening to this that they want success in their life, they don't know how to get there, they don't know what path to go on, what is one piece of advice you'd leave that person with?
Yeah, so I didn't get into this part about peace. Like I told you about pieces from whatever someone's faith is. Mine, I'm a Christian. But I think the biggest piece of advice I can give someone on peace, besides your faith, is perspective. I think perspective is powerful. And I'll give an example, like with my job and how I've like been able to switch my perspective. So I actually made my job as fun as possible. So I love David Goggins. I know you do too. I love Mike Posner. For those people that don't know, Mike Posner walked across the U.S. He, I think, took like 6 months to do that. So these guys are doing these hard things to build discipline. Yeah. And a lot of people, I could look at my job as pretty difficult with the deliveries. I'm doing like 150 to 200 stops in 100-degree weather or whatever. But I was like, I want to look at my job. I want to change my perspective and look at my job as like discipline, and character building. So when I flipped that, it changed everything. And then I took it even further. I was like, how can I try to fulfill my purpose while working? So I listened to audiobooks, I listened to podcasts. Then I took it even further. How can I help people while I'm doing this? So I'm always looking for opportunities. So I think if anyone's in a bad situation, if you can like shift your perspective, it will change everything. Because there's a grieving process that everyone has to go through, right? Like, I get that. Like, if you lose a relationship, you're grieving that loss. It's like a death of a relationship. You're grieving something. But at some point, you have to move from grief and find like a purpose for that pain, and basically be able to change things. And that's what I've really learned to do, is to be. I look at my so going back to like my sentencing. And how I look at that, I look at it as, because it's gone this long, that could be a good thing for me, because I've been able to figure out my purpose. When I went to the sentencing, instead of 7 years, they were recommending 2 years, and I didn't even get that because of like, they didn't know about the bipolar thing. So instead of looking at it as a horrible thing hanging over my head, I'm finding these perspectives that this is all happening for my good. And I just think if people are able to like change their perspective on how they view things, it might not happen right away, but after you grieve, just try to find the good in things, and perspective is power.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, David, it's been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you coming on, sharing your story. I hope people, gain some inspiration from this if they're going through a rough patch like that, or maybe they just need a kickstart into going to something more purposeful. Proud of everything that you've overcome, and all that's to come. I know you have some speaking and writing in the works, and excited to see what comes from you, but I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on.
Of course.
It's been great becoming friends with you.
Absolutely.